I'm not the greatest storyteller, but I'll try my best to tell you what happened. Even after 5 years, remembering this part of my life makes me sick to my stomach. When we fall in love, the last thing we think our partner is capable of is wanting us dead. In a normal relationship, we believe that to be the exact opposite of love. As time goes on and the relationship grows stronger, we become more and more comfortable with each other, often to the point of revealing our biggest secrets. However, there sometimes comes a moment at the end of that relationship when we regret revealing those secrets because love rarely ends happily. In that situation, a former partner may feel unveiling that secret is a way to take revenge over the one that spurned them. Although we all may fear that our former mate may use what they know against us, I've only known one person who was willing to kill another human to ensure that never happened. Soon after completing college, I ran into a girl I had once briefly worked with. For the sake of privacy, we'll call her Mandy. I've been a manager at the GameStop located in my hometown, a place you've never heard of, so I'll leave out the name. Since I was a manager, having a relationship with another employee was frowned upon. So, despite our obvious attraction for each other, we kept things professional. However, knowing that there was no such barrier to us now, we soon started seeing each other and it quickly became physical. Looking back, I think we were rushing things because we felt we had a lot to make up for. And the amazing thing about relationships that are so passionate is they are exciting, but unfortunately burn out quickly and all that passion can turn into hate. This was the case with us, and it was all from her side. She was unable to accept that I would move for my new job and not stay in our little hick town with her. We managed to go our separate ways and agreed not to see each other again. My life went ahead and I moved to Dallas to take a new job. My memory of my time with Mandy was fading away. This was all changed when I received a phone call from a police detective from back home. He said that he needed me to come into the station and speak to him. He was quick to assure me that I was not being investigated, but it was an important situation involving my relationship with Mandy. I'll admit right now I was freaking out, but also puzzled considering it had been several months since we had even spoken to each other. When I arrived at the police station, I was led into an empty room and asked to sit and wait for the detective. This did little to help my feelings of dread. After waiting for what seemed like hours, the detective came into the room and sat across from me. What he said to me next would change my life forever. We received a tip from one of our confidential informants that your ex-girlfriend was looking to hire a hitman. After a 2-month-long investigation, we sent in one of our undercovers to meet with her to discover her true intentions. At the end of that meeting, we felt we had enough evidence to take Miss Lawrence into custody. After several hours of interrogation, she confirmed that you were indeed the target. My jaw dropped, and I asked the detective to repeat what he had just said. There was no way Mandy would do something like this. For a moment, I thought it was all a cruel joke. This kind of thing doesn't happen in real life, just in movies. But once I saw the file and heard the recording of her admitting to it, I had no other choice but to accept it. The detective and I spent the next 3 or so hours discussing my history with Mandy from beginning to end, and were still left with no motive. She refused to give a reason, and I was at a loss myself. Okay, the aftermath of our breakup was rather rocky, but nowhere near the point of having me terminated, so to speak. Hiring a hitman is an extreme answer to any problem, and I couldn't think of any that severe between us. We had to wait almost a year for the trial to start, but when it finally did, we got the answer to our number one question. It appeared that one night, Mandy had let slip to me a story pertaining to an ex-boyfriend that she was mortified I would repeat. She had woken up with this guy, and when she discovered he was engaged a few months later to a new girl, she contacted the girl and told her all sorts of lies about him. The lies scared the new girlfriend so much that she canceled the wedding and dumped him. She had apparently agreed to not tell the guy the source of the stories or even exactly what was said. She just bailed. To make the story even more crazy, Mandy was now going out with the same guy again. From what she said in her testimony, She was afraid that I would tell the guy that she was the person that destroyed his impending marriage. The funniest thing about this whole situation is that I didn't even remember that story until she repeated it in court. I guess the relationship was that important to her. So important that she would attempt to take the life of another she once claimed to also love. Well, anyway, Mandy was found guilty and sentenced to 10 years, and I imagine she'll probably be out in about 7. So Mandy, if you ever do read this and manage to get out of jail, I have a great idea. Let's never meet again. In my 20s and 30s, I lived in an apartment complex in an upscale section of a large Dallas suburb. I had moved there with my longtime girlfriend, but within 2 years, we went our separate ways. Despite the split, I decided to stay in the apartment because it was a great neighborhood and I never liked moving if I didn't have to. I was able to make friends on occasion with the tenants nearby, but for most of my time living there, I spent alone. This wasn't really a problem as I worked long days during the week, so I was usually too tired in the evenings to want to socialize. The weekends were spent cleaning and completing the chores that had remained undone from days or weeks before. However, when I did find myself at loose ends on the occasional Saturday evening, I would invariably find amusement at one of the coffee shops or bars that were densely scattered throughout the neighborhood. My hangout of choice soon became a small English-style pub conveniently located across the street from my block of apartments. The quiet, laid-back tone of the bar was what I liked most about it, but soon I would also make friends with several of the employees. Generally, the same group of people worked every Saturday night, so we quickly got to know each other well. Lisa, a tall and curvy redhead, caught my eye almost immediately. She had been the first girl in God knows how long I had been truly interested in. Luckily, I discovered she felt the same way about me, and we started seeing each other on our corresponding days off. We did our best to take things slowly, considering we had both just ended our long-term relationships. Hers had only ended just recently, and her ex had been very jealous and possessive. I liked her a lot, so I was willing to give her as much space as she needed. The following couple of weeks went by smoothly, especially when it came to Lisa and I. We continued to see each other on our nights off and would occasionally meet at the coffee shop next door to the bar and chat on our breaks. On Saturday nights, I would hang out at the pub. I would generally be met with friendly faces, but there was one bartender that used to give me dirty looks and ignore me if I asked him for help. One night, soon after I started dating her, I asked Lisa if she knew what the guy's deal was with me, and she told me something I wasn't expecting. The rude bartender was her ex, the possessive one she had just broken up with. I naturally was a bit confused and asked her why she was still working on the same nights as him. I didn't expect her to just quit her job because she had broken up with a fellow employee, but surely she could have asked her boss to change her schedule so the two of them wouldn't have to work together. Bringing this up, I tried to show enough concern while not seeming too controlling, since I knew that had been one of the problems in their relationship. After all, we were just casually dating. We had agreed that we were still free to see other people if we wanted. The last thing I wanted was to make her think I was just like him. She assured me that they had agreed to not let it affect their working relationship, and besides, the bar owners frowned on employees dating each other. She was afraid that if she had mentioned the situation to her boss, he would punish her in some way or even fire her, so she just kept it to herself. Despite my concerns, I figured that she knew her ex better than I did, and if she didn't foresee any problems, I'd have to take her word for it. Besides, if the most I got from the guy was the evil eye once in a while, I probably didn't have much to worry about him either. At least, that's what I thought. Things between Lisa and I continued to progress well. So well, in fact, she started staying over Saturdays, and the idea of her still working with her ex-boyfriend had slipped completely out of my mind. I would meet her after work and walk with her back to my place. This was our weekly routine until the winter started to really kick in. By December, it had become too cold to walk, so I started picking her up in my car. One late Saturday night, I met her at the back door of the bar like I did every week. As she walked toward the car, I could tell she was upset about something. When she got to the car, I asked her if she was okay. She cut me off and coldly assured me she was only tired and asked if I could take her to the gas station so she could get some coffee. Since I had no reason to think she was anything other than worn out from work, I agreed. As she came back to the car from the store, the bright lights lit up her face. I could tell she had been crying. Her face still held that deep red tone. When she got back in the car, she said she just wanted to go straight to bed. The urge to ask her what the matter was consumed me, but her icy demeanor stopped me. I hadn't seen her like this before, so I didn't know how persistent I could be before it sparked an argument. After all, maybe she was just tired, like she said, and her nerves were frayed. When we arrived at my place, she continued to say nothing. I did notice she stayed back near the passenger side of my car. She hadn't followed me to my front door like usual. Noticing this, I turned back to her to see if I could see what was holding her attention, but as soon as I began walking back to the car, she snapped out of her daze and followed me to the door. Once we finally made it inside, she went straight to my bed to lie down. I was confused by her behavior. She seemed severely exhausted but wired at the same time. I glanced at her and noticed she was looking through the blinds next to my bed. Outside the window, the bright headlights from a car lit up her face and the bedroom she was in. Upon seeing the lights, she rolled off the bed and onto the floor and started screaming, "No!" Before one word could leave my mouth, 2 loud bangs and the crashing of glass filled the bright little bedroom. My instincts must have taken over because I found myself lying flat on the floor with my hands on my head. The screeching of car tires quickly came and went, and just as quickly the room went dark and silent as it had been moments before. Looking up from my hands, I saw Lisa's motionless form curled into the fetal position at the foot of the bed. I felt fear creep over me. Not because of the bedlam that had just occurred. I was still unsure if it was real. I was afraid Lisa was dead. Just as I started to lunge to her place on the floor, she sprung out of her ball and began wailing. Her eyes darted around the room, as did her hands, reaching out as if though she had been blinded. Pity overwhelmed me. The sight of her panic and fear tore at my heart. Grabbing out to her, she took my hand and pulled me to her. She continued her muffled wail as she rocked slowly in the dark, cold room. The police arrived sometime that morning. Not sure when, although it was likely within a few minutes of the gunshots. I did my best to tell the detectives what had occurred, but it was Lisa that had seen the attack firsthand. It took a week or more before she was able to fill in the gaps. Apparently, things had not been going as smoothly as she had led me to believe. The ex had been harassing her, leaving violent messages on her phone, threatening her and myself. She had done her best to keep him at arm's length, but everything had come to a head that night. He had shown up at the bar around closing time, ranting about how he was going to blow us away and then end himself. He had driven away before I had arrived, so she hoped he had went home, but it seems he followed my car back to my apartment. The rest, of course, you already know. The highway patrol managed to catch up to him a few days later. He never said what exactly he had intended to do with us, but in the end, I guess that doesn't really matter. The damage was done regardless. Of course, a relationship would have to be rock solid to make it through such a harrowing situation like that, and I guess ours wasn't. Lisa contacted me just once more to tell me goodbye. She was moving west to stay with some friends, and we agreed it was probably best that I didn't know where she was moving to, just in case. I moved back to my hometown that spring, and I hope to this day, Lisa will find the peace she deserves. I have a sister about 5 years older than me. She always had addiction issues, at least as long as I can remember. On top of that, her choice of men had been just as bad, if not worse. She moved out at 17 and straight into an apartment with 3 other addicts. One of them was a 30-something-year-old tweaker with a long history of dating barely legal girls. Of course, my sister fell head over heels for him and ended up moving in with him and his mother within a month of meeting him. This relationship followed the usual pattern most of her others had in the past. They'd score dope together. He'd beat her up for taking more than her share and then beg her forgiveness. She would move back in with our family, but his begging and crying always drew her back to him. Over time, the apologies came less and less until she believed it was her fault for his actions and gave herself over to him completely. It didn't take long before the drugs take their toll and she was unable to hold down a job for more than a few days. Naturally, he couldn't be expected to work because of some phantom ailment or condition he suffered from. His only solution for their problem was to turn her onto the streets to sell her body for the substances they so badly craved. It took a near-death beating from him to get her to see him for the garbage he was. She ran home to my parents and they took her in with open arms. Thankfully, the horror of almost losing her life brought her to the clarity she had lacked in the past. Her determination to get clean and change her life for the better was finally strong enough for her to pull it off. My parents once again funded a 90-day stint in a rehab program, the fourth time in fact. We were all pleased to see her taking it seriously, and even after leaving the treatment facility, she continued to attend NA meetings and keep clean. She took a job as a secretary at a local doctor's office and stayed there for several years until she left to raise her first child. Perhaps the biggest change in her life was finding God. She had begun attending a small Baptist church in the area and was soon volunteering there and at other church-run organizations on her days off. Since our family had never been the church-going type, this choice had seemed the strangest to us, but I was unhappy she had found a source of solace and security after all she had suffered. About 6 months after her release from rehab, my sister met a handsome young man when she was volunteering at the church food kitchen. He was also a volunteer there in addition to a leader of another local church's choir. Despite her attraction to him, she had learned from her past bad decisions to take things slow, even though she had found everything about him wonderful. This courtship lasted 2 years, and in that time, he did his best to show her how much he was unlike the other men that had been in her past. When the time came, and he asked for her to marry him, he made sure to get the father's approval. Of course, my father and the rest of the family approved of the kind and respectful young man. We couldn't be happier that she had finally found a loving partner. The wedding was beautiful and couldn't have went more smoothly. However, when they came back from the honeymoon a week later, what had occurred shocked us all. The first night after they had reached the hotel, they had an argument over her tipping the man who brought the food to their room. He said she had made him look unmanly because she had not let him be the one who tipped the man. She saw this as no big deal, and in an attempt to cool the situation, she apologized. This only served to make him even more angry, and the fight escalated to the point of him slapping her. Almost as soon as it happened, he began apologizing profusely and blamed his outburst on jet lag. Thinking it the most wise choice at the time, she accepted his apology, but in her mind she knew that when they got back home, the marriage was over. It broke her heart that it had ended this way, but she had made a pledge to herself all those years ago in that hospital bed that she would never let a man take advantage of her love again. Just as she promised, the divorce was filed the following week. As usual with men like him, he spent all his waking moments begging on the phone for forgiveness and asking her to come home to him, sometimes even breaking down in sobs. My sister did her best to ignore his groveling and turn her life onto a new and better path. For the most part, she managed to achieve this, at least until we took the choice away from her. One Monday morning, about 2 months after the divorce was finalized, my sister left for work like usual. However, around noon, the office called her home to find out that there was a reason she wasn't coming to work. We assured her boss that she had left for work at 7:30 like she did every day. An unanswered call to her cell phone freaked us out, and we alerted the police right away. The only conclusion we could come up with was that her ex-husband had abducted her, or something much worse. We gave the cops all the information we could think of. All was left was to just sit and wait. The next 2 days moved at a snail's pace until we received a phone call from the police that my sister had been found and she was still alive. They had tracked them down to a ramshackle cabin. A passing motorist saw her ex-husband's car and called in with the location. The state police managed to storm the cabin early in the morning, catching him off guard. We could see when we reached the hospital that he had beaten her pretty badly. My intuition tells me he did much more, but I would never dream of asking her to relive it. We were all just overjoyed to have her back. The trial didn't happen for another year, and when it did, my sister showed her strength by testifying against that monster. The jury found him guilty and he was sentenced to 20 years. Believe it or not, my sister managed to move ahead. She was even able to find a lasting and loving marriage. I've been blessed with 2 beautiful nieces and hope to be blessed with more. Her new husband is the finest man I've ever known and would give his life for my sister and his daughters. She has finally found that stable life she had been searching for so long. There is, however, a cloud hanging over this idyllic family. They were just notified that her ex-husband is being released on parole. After serving only 12 years of his sentence, he has conned the parole board into believing he was a new man. For the sake of my family and my sisters, I hope he really has. I'm what people like to call old school, which means I like to do things the old way. When I want coffee, I make it in a coffee maker in my kitchen. If I need a new piece of clothing, I go to a men's store and buy it. And when I want to read a new book, I go to a library and borrow it. If that's not an option, I visit my local bookstore and buy it. Of course, I know it would likely be cheaper to order from Amazon, but I prefer to spend my money locally with people from my community. On a recent visit to my favorite bookstore, I was unable to find the title I was interested in. I was pleasantly surprised to be helped by a hot little item we'll call Rhonda. She notified me that the book was only available by special order. I gave her my information so the book could be shipped to the store and I could pick it up when it arrived. We flirted back and forth until, before I knew it, we decided to go on a date together. We set it for that Saturday and I went on my way. Saturday arrived and I decided to take her to dinner at one of those big chain family-style restaurants. She struck me as a meat and potatoes kind of girl and I knew this place made both well. She was pleased with the place as I had hoped. Despite being a petite and thin girl, she managed to put away her massive entree easily. I was pleased to see she felt comfortable enough around me to be herself. After dinner, we enjoyed our desserts and coffee and chatted about our lives. When the subject of her last boyfriend came up, she told me the basics of how they met and how the relationship ultimately ended. From what she said, they didn't have much in common and had only spent a few weeks together. That was until the fool decided to break up with her through a text. Even though we agreed that this was a low thing to do, she easily laughed it off and told me how she had poisoned his dog for revenge. I froze in place as she continued to chuckle her way through her horrid tale. The look on her face as she told it proved that the idea that this was a psycho reaction never entered her warped mind. I quietly choked down the rest of my dessert, trying not to betray the outright fear coursing through me. I had met some crazy girls in my time, but she was the definition of overreaction. I acted as normally as I could on the drive to her house, and as she left my car, oblivious to the fact that we'd surely never see one another again, I counted myself lucky. I would hate to see how she would react if I dumped her after a short relationship. At least I didn't have a dog. I happily went back to my normal life and tried to put Rhonda out of my mind. There wasn't a peep from her until that next Saturday came around. She called 3 times and left as many messages through the course of the day, but I did my best to ignore her. Fortunately, the rest of the weekend was quiet. Things remained that way until Monday when she began blitzing my phone with confused messages. Each one was more and more frantic. The last was left Friday evening with just the desperate statement, "I thought we had made a connection. You've broken my heart." I know I may sound heartless, but I'd had my share of crazy relationships, and some turning violent. The last thing I wanted was to get into another. I was pleasantly surprised not to hear from her again after that last message. Things went back to normal, and I had reassured myself that regardless of how crazy she could become, she'd never be able to come to my house and stab me to death in my sleep or something insane like that. As if she could hear my thoughts, a text popped up in my phone a couple of weeks later. It was from Rhonda, and it simply said, "You forgot something." My heart sank. That's when I remembered the book. The book I'd ordered from her and had given her my address to do it. That's why I'm writing this crazy story. I need help from all of you out there reading this. What should I do? I don't care about some stupid book. There is something much more serious going on here. Please, help me. I'm purposely going to leave out names and certain details of this story. My main reason is to respect my aunt's privacy and that of the other families involved. I wouldn't have told it all, but I feel a certain responsibility to remind people that the police are not always right. My mother's sister had been in and out of our life throughout my childhood. Once she had been able to conquer her addiction problems, she became a much more important part of our family. However, before she could get herself together, she was the victim of a hideous crime. One late night, she was helping a friend find a motel room when they were kidnapped and left for dead. Thankfully, my aunt was able to crawl to a main road for help, but despite this, her friend didn't survive. She managed to identify one of the men involved, and the police caught up with him quickly, but since she was unable to give them many details on the other killer, the police doubted his existence. Considering the extent of her injuries, they assumed she had just imagined him. Although it was obvious that it would have been much harder for one man to abduct two young women, they wrote off her claims as just another irrational female. She did her best to return to the drug-free path she had set herself upon before the whole thing happened. Her days were filled with work, and her free time was spent doing her best to prevent the police from closing the case. Despite the fact the cops continued to believe that her attacker acted alone, she was continually providing them with similar crimes where the witnesses identified two young men. Regardless of the evidence, her claims fell on deaf ears. As the months dragged on, she became more convinced that the second killer would never be found. After Thanksgiving, the family focused more on the coming Christmas holiday and all the goodies that come with it. Whether we wanted to or not, my aunt and I were nominated by my dad to pick up a present for my mom. He would be working out of town until the last week of the month, so he gave us the job. I don't have to tell you how chaotic the Christmas shopping season is, but we managed to achieve our goal a few days early. To celebrate our triumph, we decided to stop off and get some fancy coffee. The traffic was light, so we saw no reason the car behind us should be riding our bumper. He soon started flashing his lights, and when we came to an empty stretch of road, he pulled to the lane next to us and began ramming the side of the car. It was obvious at this point he was trying to run us off the road. I freaked out, of course. Being only 19 at this point, I had never been in a situation like this, and how I didn't crash right away is beyond me. The second time he rammed his car into mine, my aunt started yelling out, "That's him! That's the guy that killed..." and she mentioned her friend. She immediately dialed 911 and told them what was happening. It took a couple of minutes before the highway patrol came into sight behind us. When we were about 50 yards from the roadblock, the man ramming us slowed down and tried to turn around, but another cop car behind us blocked him in. Realizing he had nowhere to go, he gave up. That Christmas was the best our family had ever had. The second killer eventually took a plea deal so he could avoid the death penalty. It wasn't until much later that the detectives told him he could have got away with his crime had he not tried to come after us. My aunt has yet to get an apology from the police department, but she's happy in the knowledge she was right when everyone else doubted her. Despite my many misgivings, I'm writing this story down because my counselors agree that doing so could be a positive step in my therapy. Since I've been here for almost a year, I assume that some of those involved in getting me better think it's time for me to move on with my life. I'm not so sure, but here we go. I was shy and bookish in high school. Because of that, I guess I failed to attract the attention of boys. I didn't really mind. Most of the boys I knew in school were jocks or immature gamer types. Besides, the last thing I had on my mind was dating. My focus was on school, and I was determined to get into the best college I could. Then maybe I would be able to cut out a small bit of time to meet someone. At least, that was my plan. Other than reading, my greatest love is music. All the best moments in my life are connected to a song. My best friend and I would go to every concert that we could. One year I counted and figured out we had been to 10 shows. So yeah, when I say greatest love, I mean it. In May of 2016, The Cure was playing the Bowl. So we went, and that night I met Adam. He looked like your average goth emo type guy. Somehow, we had made eye contact in that mass of thousands of people, and I guess this gave him the okay to come talk to me. Normally, I would have blown him off since I'm not interested in guys that look like they're trying to be cool. Look, I may be shy, but I have no problem telling people what I think of them. Before I could do the same to him, Adam flashed a smile so beautiful it melted my heart. Once he had gotten my attention, I began listening to what he was saying, and to my surprise, he was the smartest person I'd ever met. Usually I'm the smartest person in the room, wherever I go, but everything that came out of his mouth floored me. And that's all it took. I was in love. We spent the rest of the show talking about everything under the sun. I'm not even sure what songs The Cure played. For the first time in my life, music took a back seat to a boy. When I spoke, he actually listened, and when he did, he made the most mundane things sexy. When the concert ended, we exchanged numbers and made plans to get together as soon as possible. Since he lived in the next city over and had his own car, he promised to pick me up the next Saturday and take me somewhere I'd love. That week dragged by so slowly that I was unable to focus on anything else. When Saturday finally arrived, I started getting ready almost as soon as I woke up. It was my first date, and I wanted to be ready as soon as he called. Pretty sad, I know, but Adam was special. When he finally called, I told him to pick me up at the end of the block. I didn't want to have to introduce Adam to my grandparents. Don't get me wrong, they were great people, but traditional. Adam wouldn't have met up to their expectations, regardless of how smart he was. Our date turned out to be at a local upscale bistro coffee shop. It was by far the nicest place I had ever been, and I loved it. We shared a set of appetizers and finished the meal with coffee and dessert. Most of the boys I knew couldn't even say biscotti, let alone know what a bistro was, so I was impressed. The real surprise was after dinner when he took me to the large park on the edge of the city. We got there after 10, so we had the place to ourselves. We sat on a bench next to the lake and told each other the story of our lives. Once we were cuddled together, Adam looked over to me and placed a clumsy but tender kiss on my lips. It was the epitome of romantic. I always thought that I was above such tripe, but I discovered that when you fall in love, things such as this lose their cheesiness. We sat in silence for many minutes just talking in the beautiful scene. Then Adam began to speak in a quiet but concise voice. That was the first time I've ever kissed a girl. The tone in his voice was so cute, I wasn't able to stop myself from letting out a small laugh. I told him I wasn't laughing at him. I had just found the honesty of his confession so sweet. I couldn't help myself. About the time I got the last word from my mouth, I felt the sudden, stinging sensation of a slap across my mouth and chin. A warm, throbbing feeling continued to grow just below my nose, and the salty taste of blood filled my mouth. No, I can't do this right now. It's still too painful. Everything that happened is my fault anyway. Here we are again. It looks as if I've lost the battle against my masters. I had hoped that if I managed to put off finishing this story, the doctors would let it slide for at least the remainder of the year. Unfortunately, I was warned that if continued to put off what they called the inevitable, They would be forced to drug me and make me relive it in my personal sessions. I'm not sure at this point which choice is worse, but I know by choosing to tell it here, I have some control on how the story is told. So, this is the option I've chosen. Once I realized I had been hit, I was frozen. Even though I could taste the blood in my mouth, the shock of being slapped by someone I loved was confusing. I know I was mortified to look at him in the face. The wait for another strike was agonizing, but it never came. At first, I thought he had ran away, but when I turned to look at him, his face was a frozen mask of shock. He looked as if though he had been the one who had been slapped, but once he realized I was facing him, the mask changed to one of fear and regret. I was at once overwhelmed by a blast of apologies and excuses. Despite all that was going on around me, all I could do was tell him to take me home. The apologies continued, but once he surrendered to the fact that his words were hopeless, he could only say, "Okay." On the walk and the long drive to my house, neither of us spoke. I don't know his thoughts, but when it came to me, I was still in a level of shock almost to the point of catatonic. As I walked to my front door, I could hear a string of muffled words coming from the car, but I was in no state to hear them or even care what they were. He slowly drove away, and that was the beginning of the end. I was unable to even comprehend what had happened for 2 days. My phone had been assaulted by calls from Adam since at least Sunday morning. I made no effort to listen to the messages he left, and once my box was full, the calls increased. I'm unaware of what occurred at school that Monday and honestly don't know when I got home. It wasn't until that night that I began slipping from my stupor. The fact that the guy I loved more than life itself had slapped me hit me far harder than he ever could. The dam broke free and I cried myself to sleep that night. I had no desire to go to school the next day, so I didn't. Besides being psychologically destroyed, the idea of explaining to my friends what had happened made me physically ill, too. I returned to school Thursday but refused to answer my friends' questions until they decided to let it go and stop asking. Adam's calls continued but became less frequent as the weeks dragged on until they all but stopped. I had decided that if he did call again, that I would answer. The time had finally arrived for me to confront him about hitting me and explain in clear terms that our relationship was over. Regardless of how sad it made me, I knew I would never be able to respect myself again. It wasn't long before he did call, and I answered just as I had planned. His voice was filled with joy and a tinge of surprise. Before he could say much, I interrupted him and let him know that any sort of relationship that we had been ruined by his behavior, and hung up the phone. The rest of the week was quiet, and my courage to tell him everything was over gave me a new hope that I may possibly survive this breakup. Unfortunately, Adam wasn't going to let that happen. He left me alone for a few days before he decided to take things to a new level. I felt that if he called, I was strong enough to deal with anything he had to say to me, but I was wrong. "Look, I know I made a mistake, but it's your fault I did it. You shouldn't have laughed at me. I've given you plenty of time to get over it, so let it go so we can move on." His voice was so cold and what I could best describe as commanding. It sent a chill down my spine. I was so shocked at his inability to accept the situation. The best I could say was, "No, I'm sorry. We're done." And I hung up the phone, still somewhat confused. His ability to push the blame onto me so easily had me honestly bewildered. I couldn't fathom how someone so intelligent could be so sensitive. I actually caught myself asking if I was indeed at fault for his actions, but blew that from my mind quickly. Things went back to radio silence for a few days until he called with his ultimatum to me. "Look, I'm sick of this. Either we get back together, or I'll be forced to do something terrible to you and everyone you love. Without you, I have nothing to live for anyway." I could tell he had been crying. He tried to hide it, but the wavering in his voice gave it away. "Yeah, sure," was all I could say before I broke out in laughter and hung up. I was in awe of how someone could know someone such a short time and be so obsessed with them. That was the moment I realized I was over him, and I could smile for the first time in a long time. Life luckily returned to what it was before, and Adam faded away. Each year around my birthday, my mother would come into town and take me out to dinner to celebrate. My relationship with my mother is somewhat complex. I view her just like a normal child views a parent, despite only seeing her at the holidays. It was decided when I was much younger that I would live with my grandparents because of the nature of my mom's job. She worked for an insurance company assessing damage claims made by policyholders. Therefore, she was only around home a few days a month. Put this together with a deadbeat dad I hadn't seen since I was 2, and it only seemed natural I lived with my mom's parents. My mom showed up the night before my actual birthday and slept over. The next evening, we went to our favorite restaurant in LA. We spent our evening catching up, and that meant I told her about my brief but whirlwind romance with Adam. She was supportive of my decision to walk away and reminded me of my plans for my future, none of which had room for a relationship. Our evening was great as usual, and after dessert we made our way back to my grandparents' house. My mom's plan was to spend the night and give me my present in the morning. I was perhaps the happiest and most excited I had been in a long time. When we entered the house, it was oddly silent. It was a Sunday, so my grandfather was usually parked in front of the TV watching football until 10, and my grandmother was either sitting with him or doing something in the kitchen. But none of this was happening. The lights were off in the living room, which made my mom and I even more nervous. So as we entered it, I switched them on, and that's when we saw it. Now from this point, you'll have to rely on what others had told me, because when I saw what had been done, well, it all stopped there. Apparently, Adam tied both my grandparents' hands up and shot them. As if this wasn't horrible enough, he scrawled "Who's Laughing Now" on the living room wall in their blood. My mother informed the police of my history with Adam and the threats he had made. I was unable to answer any other questions they may have had. After a 3-day search, the police got a call about a young man's body being found on a bench near the lake at the park. It was Adam, and he had shot himself. In his warped mind, it was probably a way to ruin a special moment for me, or maybe he wanted to die at the last place he was happy. I can't even begin to imagine what was going on in his shattered psyche that awful night. I'm still not sure if I should be happy I was out that night or not. That was it. Adam was dead, so there was no one to try for the crime, so the police and everyone else involved moved on. Well, that is everyone else but me. My mom admitted me a few days after the murders. It was obvious that I wasn't handling the whole situation well, and I've been here ever since. It's been almost a year since the death of my grandparents and Adam. If there is one thing I have come to learn here is that these doctors, these people in charge, don't know anything. Writing down all the wretched things that happened and what led them to happening has only made me feel worse. Also, it has just reinforced what I have always believed, all the way back to the night it all unfolded. All this, everything that happened, is and was my fault. The following incident occurred in the late 90s when I was living in the States attending uni. I was about 19 at the time, and like most girls of my age, thought that nothing bad would ever happen to me. To be fair, I had managed to grow up without experiencing any real problems that I couldn't handle. Looking back, I guess I had been sheltered from the world, and this had made me somewhat spoiled. Carrying this mindset with me to university did me no good and caused me to put myself in a situation that could have ruined my life forever. Like most of the other girls in my dorm, I enjoyed having a good time. Studies had their place, and some focused on them more than others, but almost all of us living there liked to party now and then. New Orleans is known all over the world for its party atmosphere, and its many bars and clubs play a large part in that atmosphere. It's a heaven on earth for young people looking for somewhere to have a good time and blow off steam. A group of us girls had the goal of going to every bar and club in town, or as many as would be possible in the 4 years we would be there. It was a lofty goal in any university town, but in New Orleans it was more of a quest. The weekend after the Christmas-New Year's holiday had ended and the term was to begin, a small group of us made plans to go out and party before school began that Monday. When that Saturday came around, I was the only one of the girls that wasn't ill. Not being one to let others' sicknesses get in my way of having a good time, I decided to go out anyway. We had planned to check out a small neighborhood bar just off of Bourbon Street, so that was where I started the night. It had the usual comfortable atmosphere you get from a neighborhood bar. I met a couple of the usual customers, mostly folks who lived or worked in the area, but the best part of the place had to be the cute bartender that poured me my first drink. I was invited to sit at a table with a couple of the other students I knew, and we began catching up on how our holidays had worked out. They left the table a couple of minutes after I sat down because the couple they were supposed to meet there showed up and waved them over to join them at their table. Realizing I had yet to even take a drink of my pint, I took a long slug, leaving only the last quarter. It didn't take long before I started feeling very dizzy. My tolerance had certainly decreased over the holidays, but I knew it would certainly take more than half a pint to put me under the table. There had to be something wrong, but in my state, I was unable to even form lucid thoughts. A pair of older men I didn't recognize joined me at the table. Instead of asking if I was okay, they claimed to be friends of my roommates. When I stated that I felt ill, they quickly volunteered to escort me back to my dorm. Before I could even react, the other two men whisked me out of the door of the bar and down the street. Through my glassy eyes, I attempted to focus on the sidewalk and where they were leading me. Despite being at the point of near unconsciousness, I had the clarity to realize we were going in the opposite direction of my dorm. That realization filled my body with fear and caused me to panic. I began yelling in a slurred tone, No, not this way." Men quickly attempted to quiet me down and assure me they knew the way. The fear that I may fall completely unconscious must have given me a shot of adrenaline. There was no way I was going to let these guys take me to God knows where and do what else or worse. The yells sounded more like screams this time. A group of college-age men walked past us and I took my chance. Help me! Help me!" It was the best I could muster, but it did its job. The group approached us and began asking if I was okay and what was going on. The two men with me tried to convince the group that I was just acting crazy, but the college guys didn't buy it. "Hey, how about we call the cops and you can explain the situation to them?" Upon hearing this, the two men ran away without another word. The college guys stayed with me until the police and ambulance arrived. They explained what had happened to the officers and I was taken away to spend the night at the hospital. When the police followed up, I told them what I could piece together from my still murky memory. Unfortunately, I was unable to give them any idea of who had drugged me. All we could be certain of was that my drink had been the source of the drugs, but who had actually done the spiking, no one could say. The investigation ended up going nowhere since there was no clear suspects or information. I was forced to continue with school, uncertain if those two men would come after me again or try to victimize other unsuspecting women. The semester ended and I flew home, unsure if I would return in the spring. I made the decision to return and I'm glad I did, considering I would go on to meet my future husband, Jerry, in my final year of university. The two gentlemen that attempted to abduct me were never arrested as far as I know, but it did come to light later that the cute bartender that poured my beer that night was being paid by the two unnamed men to drug the drinks of women that they pointed out to him. All these years later, I am still very aware of how lucky I was that night and how bad things could have went. If I'm ever blessed with a daughter, I will be sure to tell her that story when the time is right to ensure she does her best to never put herself in any position where she could come across any man like those two I met that night. I want to make it clear that I'm not posting this story here to scare anyone. Its one and only purpose is to remind you all that you are not almighty. You can be hurt, and there are men out there just sitting and waiting for a chance to take advantage of the smallest mistake. If you want to go out and have fun and blow off some steam, please do and enjoy yourself. However, keep the story in mind and let it serve as a warning. Please, always bring at least one friend along with you anytime you plan on going out. You never know. you may be the one that ends up saving a life.
Hello. Mm. Oh, I saw. Oh, sorry. I saw you on here, so I caught on here instead. Hi, everyone. Oh, it looks cute. Mm, it looks cute. It looks cute. And while you do that, Drago's gonna go get some drink. I know. I'm a silly bear.
I was a jail nurse for about 3 years in a correctional facility that housed approximately 1,300 inmates. Loved the job. Would have stayed longer, but administration sucked. But that's another story. I work night shift and have had some creepy stuff happen that just could be rationally explained. I worked both booking and infirmary, but the majority of the incidents occurred in infirmary. Okay, so I was there maybe a month, not a new nurse, but new to corrections. Anyone who has spent any time in a jail will tell you that when those heavy doors slam shut, it is a very distinctive, definitive, loud sound. So to get into the infirmary, you have to have a key or be buzzed in by central control. So I'm sitting at my desk and I hear the metal door outside my office click, like someone from Central has unlocked it, and it opens about halfway and then just slams shut. Now in my office, there is a huge glass window, so the nursing staff can see any inmates that are about to enter. So when the door slammed, I thought it was just the officers messing around, and I jumped up and went to the window, and no one was there. I called Central, and the officer that answered sounded like I just woke him from a sound sleep. I said, "Ha ha, very funny." He had no idea what I was talking about. And I knew this officer, and I was surprised that he would go along with any type of prank because Frankly, he was kind of a jerk with absolutely no sense of humor, so I just thought it was some mechanical glitch. I sat down and everything just changed. It felt colder, and I felt like I was being watched. I was just all around uncomfortable. I took my stethoscope from around my neck and put it on the desk and left my office to go into the medical department. I stayed in medical for a few, talking to the staff in there, and then went back to my office. When I walked in, I went to grab my stethoscope off the desk to check an inmate, and it wasn't there. I looked on the desk, on the side, underneath. It just wasn't there. I should mention that when I left my office, I did lock the door as per protocol, and I'm the only one on shift with the key. Now, I think I'm going crazy, so I start looking everywhere, and I cannot find it. Now, in my office, there is a large closet that holds all supplies. This is also locked, with the key being on the set of keys that I carry. Later in the shift, I needed to go into the closet and get something. I really don't remember what, and sitting in the middle of the floor is my stethoscope. I picked it up, and the heavy metal door outside my office clicks again, opens halfway, and slams shut. I locked the closet, locked my office, and went out for a smoke. I was scared, but I had responsibilities and patients to look after, so I go back in. And I swear, the whole atmosphere felt lighter. It was warmer, and I just felt more comfortable. After my shift, the central officers rewound the tapes for me, and I saw the doors just open and slam shut, with not a single person near them or in the hallway. I wish I could say that was the last time that happened or that I got comfortable with it. I didn't, because each time it happened, it seemed that the doors slammed harder, and that uncomfortable feeling lasted longer and longer, and it felt almost like being stalked. Things that went missing were found in different parts in the jail. My pen case in the woman's wing, my med sheets in solitary central control room, my portable blood pressure cuff in the kitchen, and each and every time something of mine would show up in some other part of the jail, the officers and I would look at the tapes and see no one. Remember I said I felt like I was being stalked? Well, that's because all these things happened to me, but no other nurse who worked nights. Not one other nurse who worked on my days off had any doors click or open or slam shut. Their stuff didn't disappear and then reappear somewhere else. It was just me. Every officer and every one of the medical staff who worked there well before I got there swore up and down that this type of incident never ever occurred before. It got to the point for me that I just started staying in my office. I just got all my stuff that I needed for my shift and sat at the officer's desk. I did that until I left there and got another job. I haven't had anything like that happen again. In 6th grade, I'm a senior now, I had a friend. To preserve her own anonymity, I'll call her Jenny. I grew up outside of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, near New Cumberland in a borough called Lemoyne. The streets are very close together and everyone lives near one another, and Jenny was no exception.
Also, we're into the
We had a
restroom just in
house and
case.
watched television or anime with her, as kids do. I don't
Smart
remember
thinking, huh?
exactly how the topic of her ghost came up, but we were all very invested in the paranormal.
It's smart thinking.
We had a
What
whole
the
slew of friends.
customer?
If you've
We'll take care of your
been to
customer.
Lemoyne, you would know that most of the houses are old and were added on, refurbished, remodeled, expanded. And most of these old houses are now townhouses. I think this is why Jenny had 2 closets. One closet was always closed for the most part. It was deep and it was always dark. The closet Jenny actually used to hold her clothes was on the opposite end of the room. This is why she never used the first closet. Jenny's room was always very
Ow!
unnatural.
I sat on something.
The room would open and close often, and it just generally didn't feel right.
What did I sit
Jenny
on?
had shelves across the length of her room.
Why is there a
Those
pencil in my
shelves
chair?
were porcelain dolls, still in their boxes, heirlooms from one of her relatives.
Either that it fell off my table and landed in my chair.
Move in their boxes. They would turn one way
Ow.
or the other. Always when we went.
That's not one way to get
It was
poked
such a relief
ahead.
for us to note a definitive change in their pose. It was spooky. Jenny called her ghost Mandy and said she was a
Well,
little
there's
girl.
no,
Jenny also
there's
had
no
a
way to
younger
become a
sister,
Pocahontas.
maybe 3 or 4 at the time, and Mandy hated her. She would be scratched frequently.
Well, yeah.
If her sister was in the room with us, we would be scratched too. We didn't notice them until
Well, that's
later
no way to get
as
to
they
the
didn't
point.
hurt, but I think they hurt her sister. They were on our arms for the most part. Looked like someone clawed us. It looked like they were scabbed over in the way cuts do after a couple of hours. Always 3 of them. I think Jenny's sister got them on her back, and they were a lot less superficial. It got so bad, Jenny's mom forbade Jenny's sister from going in her room. I had a phone back in 2012.
We do
This
my
phone
Peter
with a little
Tinker, baby.
keyboard that you turn on its side and slide up. I took a picture of Jenny's open closet once, and unfortunately, I no longer have the picture.
Oh, baby.
But it clearly showed a girl's face, partially hidden by the clothes Jenny had hanging.
I was watching
Mostly fancy stuff in her dad's old suits. Eyes, nose, lips, hair, the whole 9 yards. Just her face.
I was watching
almost shyly.
your favorite guy last night.
In her gaze, not that I remember. She was just there.
The one played Austin Powers.
Common knowledge among our friend group, so we decided to have a sort of junior seance, so to speak. I think there were 7 other people that came over for this. It was a whole planned out event, but we knew better than to bring a Ouija board.
But you know what goes?
People plus Jenny and I.
Yeah, baby, yeah, behave.
We agreed to go into the closet in shifts.
Well, he plays in a Dr. Seuss movie called Cat in the Hat.
It was big, but not big enough to hold 9, 11 to 12-year-olds at once. And a couple of our friends.
He plays the Cat in the Hat.
Psychics. It was all very juvenile, and we were excited.
And it also has the boy
inside the closet at the time. Convenient, I know.
The boy that's
we're pressing our ears to the door and hear
that plays the son.
All of a sudden, we hear screaming.
It's actually the same boy that plays as the elf on the Santa Claus.
The girls who believed she could talk to the ghost placed her iPhone 3 or 4 or whatever she had on a little shelf in the closet.
The one that has the glasses, or something. The one that works on the sleigh.
According to another friend who was in the closet, she had to repeat it a couple of times.
Yeah.
It was all very muffled. The door was really thick, and we couldn't really make out what they were saying, which is why we didn't hear what.
Yeah, he plays as the son for.
Could finish asking again. The phone apparently chucked itself across the closet
for that movie.
The wall, like someone had.
And then the daughter looks like.
Needless to say, we were all well and spooked, and
who else did she play in? I think she might have played in Willy Wonka.
My friend Jenny's ghost is something I still struggle to explain to this day.
No, I'll have to look it up. No, I'll have to look it up.
This happened on Tuesday. I keep going back to it, trying to find an explanation, so I thought I'd share it here. To set the scene, I work in an office on a floor.
This movie came out in 2003.
2 bathrooms, one for men and one for women, and a hallway that connects all the offices. You have to type in a code to get into the bathroom, I guess to prevent
it has
outsiders using your bathroom.
Mike Myers.
Has 3 stalls.
That's the one that plays his Austin Powers.
Stations plus air hand dryers. The ladies' bathroom.
But I think he also does the voice acting for.
It's rare to be alone in there. For this
reason,
I rarely poop at work. On this particular day, I had an urgent need, so
Dr. Evil.
I walked to the bathroom, hoping that by some miracle the bathroom would be
so.
On my way there, these 2 ladies, presumably from other offices, were walking down the same hallway to the bathroom, talking to each other.
The one that plays as the son
was irritating me,
is Conrad Walden.
To walk at a pace to follow me into the bathroom, so that they wouldn't have to punch in the code.
And his sister is.
I couldn't very well slam the bathroom door.
Joan Warden.
I let them in, and we
his sister
to the 3 stalls. I remember the thud, thud, thud of all 3 of our bathroom doors closing and locking.
Their mom.
They stopped talking after going into the stalls, and I proceeded to focus on my business. At some point,
the mom is John Warden. The daughter is Sally Warden, so it's the whole family that's playing again.
The shuffling of clothes was not at all audible. I was weirded out, but figured maybe they were just staying really, really still and quiet for some personal.
The one that plays as the sister is Dakota.
Their stalls were empty. The doors were open, and no one was there.
Yeah.
The stall doors squeaked a bit more when you opened them, and I hadn't heard that. No one was at the sink, and I hadn't heard anyone wash or dry their
The one that
hands.
played his comrade
There's only
was
one entrance slash
was
exit door to the
Spencer
bathroom, and it makes noises as well,
Baslin.
so I would have heard it if they had left. There's no way to leave that bathroom without
Yeah,
making some
and then
sort
the
of
one that plays
noise,
the mom is
so
Kelly
I just teleported
Preston.
out of the stalls. I washed and dried my hands and exited the bathroom, contemplating how they could have just disappeared.
One that plays is
Saw them.
her boyfriend
They
that's
walked me
trying to
down the
get
hallway
together
towards
with
the
her. That's not
bathroom,
really like in
walking and
fit,
talking
but he's like a
exactly as
fat
they
guy
had
and
been when I
where's a
headed into
girdle.
the bathroom. I ended up holding the door
He's
open for them again,
and
except this
he's trying to
time
like marry
they
her
wanted
and
to go in after me
send
and
combat.
go in with me.
He's trying to send
It's
combat
still
off
not
the
day, and
military
it's the
school.
first time anything like this has happened to me. I don't know them at all, and I don't remember their conversation.
That's played
Just some
by
boring personal stuff. I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts and theories.
Alec Baldwin. Mr. Hubblefluber
I work on a top floor of a building.
is her boss.
The
That's
building
the
I work
character
at is
he
a government
plays. The
organization
one
with
playing
all
is
the ministries of the
Sheen
government and over
Haynes.
4,000 offices. I've worked there for a couple of months now, and I know the place pretty well.
Their nanny is
The 10th of
Mrs.
December,
Kwan,
2015, around past
but her
11
real
a.m.
name is Amy
Something strange
Hill.
happened. I'm posting this to find out if it has ever happened to someone else, because I'm really confused and almost nobody believes me, yet takes it with a level of seriousness.
The narrator is
I'm in my
Victor
office going through my daily work routines when I get a knock
Victor
at the door. I
Bantit.
habitually respond with a "come in" as I usually do.
When it plays
The
is
client
Thing
comes
1
in,
and
I
Thing
process
2
the papers
is
for him when I
Tyler
notice the
Rice
stamp needed to authenticate the documents in my office. I tell the client to give me a minute to go downstairs to
and
get the stamp.
Tanya Lee
Waiting for me in
Prairie.
the office. The elevators are at the end of the hallway to the left of my office, 10 seconds away.
Secretary
I
is
take the elevator
played
downstairs, and
by
without wasting any time, I
Candrace
the lady in the
Brown.
office I was going to get the stamps from, just around the corner from the elevators, and I tell her the agenda of my being there. She directs me to take it from the countertop, which I do, and right away leave and go back to the elevators. I get in, and I press
there's a
the
lot of
button for the
actors in
6th floor
here.
as I always do. At this time, I say it's been about 2 minutes since I'd left my office. As it goes up, I'm alone in it. I look at the display counting floors going up as I reluctantly do all the time.
That's the
Then,
main ones
when
that you
the
know.
elevator reaches the 4th floor, power cuts off. Although it's become pitch black in the elevator,
The movie
I
came out in
eventually locate the control
2003.
panel, and I press the emergency button, and right away a voice comes on the PA
Yep.
system asking me which floor I'm on. I tell the guy the
It's at
4th floor,
24
and about a minute,
cast.
he shows up. While he is manually opening the doors, power comes back up, and I open the doors, and he asked me which floor I was going to. I told him the 6th. He told me I could use the elevator to proceed to the 6th as electricity was back. I press 6 again, and the elevator closes, and it starts rising again. Looking at the LCD as usual, the elevator passes through 5 and reaches the 6th floor. The doors open normally, and I proceed to go
Yeah, the
into my
cartoon
office.
came out, but the movie came out
As I
after.
was
I
leaving the
think.
elevator, I feel it has suddenly become a bit colder than it was before. Blazing heat in the summer this side. I could say it had almost become cold, but I didn't make a big deal out of it. When I reach my office door, same number on the door, I open the door and get in, only to find that the guy who was waiting for me, not there, but a lady I've never seen before sitting behind my desk on my computer punching away keys. Now, very confused, I just briefly pause and look at her. She looks at me with surprise and also asks if she can help me the same way you'd ask someone just walking into your office and just looking at you without saying nothing. I asked her if this was Office 6162, my office number, and she said it was. Now, extremely puzzled, I look around to scan the office, and I notice
Kelly
it has exactly the
Preston
same
played
furniture as
in.
mine and the same setup as mine. Not knowing what to say or do, I tell her, "I'm sorry, I'll be back soon, I forgot something." I step out into the hallway, and I look at the door to find it really is my office. And
Is Kelly Preston married
I
to?
just decided to go back to the elevator, not sure why, and I get in and press 6 again.
The guy
This
that
time, I'd say
played.
it's been about 5 minutes or so since I left my office. The elevator closes for a brief second and opens up again without.
She's
This
She's
time,
married
the
to
guy who works at reception I'd passed on my way down,
the guy that
just outside the
died,
elevators, was now sitting down as he was the first time I went
John
downstairs.
Travolta.
I get out and take the same route to my office, now deciding I'd just confront the lady. When I open the
He
door to my
died.
office, I find the guy who had been
He
waiting
died.
for
He
me
died at the
at the
age of
stand,
50. He died at the
sitting
age of
where I'd left him,
57.
alone with no one behind my desk. Before I even say anything,
I don't know. That's
he
safe.
says to me, "I thought you were no longer coming back, or
But
decided to go for lunch." I say to him, "Why would you think that when I just stepped away for like 5 minutes to get this stamp?"
let's
Then
see.
he says, "Man, you've been gone for
She's
more than
played
45
in
minutes.
including
You
Mischief in
left before 12?
1998,
It's like, oh, geez, it's 12:35."
Twins
Completely freaked out,
1988.
I stamp the papers for him, and he leaves. When I sit in front of my computer,
Kind of
I
movie called
realize I'd
Twins. It
actually
came out in
been gone
1988.
for more than an hour. I was 100% sober that day. I'd only had a cigarette on my way to work that day.
Jerry
Still sitting there,
McGee
blank-faced, I
or
quickly mapped how hot
Jerry
it got again,
Myber,
as it was that day.
1996, and For
I
Love
start
of the Game,
recollecting my thoughts and trying to
1991.
see what happened.
She married
The first thing I
John
know is
Travolta
I'd
in
never seen the
1991
guy who came to rescue me from the elevator before, even though I know
and
most
collaborated with
photographers
him
had
on a
seen him.
comedy film, The
I
Experts,
brush
in
it off, because
1989.
it's a slim chance I know all of them since this was a big place, but I'm sure I've seen
She
everyone
also
once or
starred in
again.
films
It was a
Space
bit out of
Camp in
place.
1986,
I
The
know
Cat
you
in the
want to know
Hat,
why I rejected
2003,
neighboring offices. Well,
What a
there's an
Girl
explanation.
Wants in
That day,
2003,
I was the only one in my department around. Others were at a workshop and others were on a field day. The
Sky
only person who
High,
was there was one of the bosses that I
2005,
generally don't talk to. Another thing I remember once I was thinking about is I
Old
don't remember seeing
Dogs,
anyone at the reception area when I got lost. I also remember that the
2001.
woman was wearing a heavy cardigan, one that you wouldn't wear in the blazing summer at this time. Other than
Um,
that,
she
everything was in place.
also auditioned for the
If there's anyone who
role
can try to explain to me
of
what happened
Elmeline
or
in The Blue
what is
Lagoon in
happening somewhere,
1980.
please let me know. And don't tell me I was high or something like everyone else. I'm from Zimbabwe, in case you were
Um,
wondering.
she played in Twins in 1988 with Arnold Schwarzenegger and Danny
I
DeVito.
was a dietary aide at an assisted living facility. When
Um,
most people hear that phrase, they think of a nursing home, cold, clinical, and filled with delusional screaming. But the
Holy.
reality is actually a lot
Well,
different.
I just said
The
Arnold
facility in which I work
Schwartz
feels more
because
like a lavish hotel,
when I try to say
and
his
less like a
name,
cute, cozy house.
when I say
Assisted
it, it
living is
kind of sounds
often
like I'm
seen as
saying
the
the
first
N
step
word, so
towards
I don't
complete
try to say
dependence,
it.
with complete dependence being a nursing home,
Um,
as most of our residents can function entirely on their own,
Hollow
but
Man
need a bit of help with mobility, memory, or
in
simply don't have the
1998.
ability to take care of their own homes anymore. Thus, we have a wide variety of residents, some of whom are only in their 60s and are nearly independent, up to residents reaching 100
That's a
and needing
sci-fi
more
movie.
constant assistance. One of our residents, we'll call her Barb, was one of the former. She was one of the younger ones,
Where
able to
a
administer her
guy
own
does
medication,
they do
get
a
herself up
science
in the morning
experiment,
and remember
and
mealtimes,
he
and just generally able to think straight and care for herself.
they inject
I've had my job for about a
they
year
inject
now,
him with
and
something, and he
steadily
actually
so
becomes
far.
invisible,
Barb and I
and
have
then he
always
goes
had a
around and
very
starts
close
killing people
relationship,
invisible.
with her always asking about my grades and my home life, and always showing me pictures of her grandkids and whatnot. She had a
She
very
starred
teasing,
in
snarky,
Nothing
and
to
sarcastic
Lose.
attitude about her, one that I found humorous and
She
enjoyable,
also starred in the
especially
movie
whenever I
Jack
returned the
Frost in
favor with my
1998.
sarcasm. Overall, we were always pretty close. Naturally, when you work in a facility in which multiple people
She
in the
played the
place have died,
girlfriend
you
of her
establish some
husband, John
boundaries.
Travolta.
I'm certainly not a psychic or anything, but I
Character
am often able to tell when a place is
Tyra in
haunted.
the
This really
film
strange feeling that I get.
Battlefield Earth.
The first time I recall this happening was after the death of my friend's mother. Her house
She was
had a
also the
particularly good feel,
superhero mother
and
in the
she never
film
asked me
Sky
for it
High.
anymore. She thought I was stupid until she woke up one morning to see her mother standing in the doorway.
In
As I
2004,
said,
she was
I'm not psychic,
in the
but I
Maroon
am a bit
5
sensitive
music
to the
video.
paranormal. The first time I
She Will
entered
Be
the
Loved.
facility, even in all of its warmth and energy, I got that sort of off feeling.
She was in the
Coworkers
film
warned
with
me that since
Adam
I rarely hear
Levine.
voices in the kitchen
Appeared in
and
a
to see
crime
innocent women
series,
go
Death
flying, which would
Sentence.
eventually become almost a weekly event for me to witness. Some people were scared to be alone in the kitchen,
She
but
was cast in
I
a
never felt that.
television plot
Even knowing
called
that the place was
The
haunted,
Burn
I simply
Shootout.
didn't feel as though I was in any danger. If anything, I felt less alone, as though I were in the presence of residents
She
I
starred in a
hadn't yet
Lifetime
met.
TV.
A few days ago, I was doing dishes in the kitchen before dinner.
She
The
starred in a
few days
Lifetime
had not
television
been enough,
film,
and the cook was
the,
on break.
the
I
Tenet
noticed that there was a
Circle.
lot more strange activity than usual. Whispering from the back mop room,
The
hanging
Tenet
pans
Circle?
swaying in the non-existent breeze, and movement just out of the corner of my eye. I ignored it,
She was
as
also the
this was still
spokeswoman
something that I
for
was accustomed to. The only
Negeline.
thing that I had found odd was that Barb had approached the kitchen door and was staring in at me, as though she wanted something.
Her final film
Usually
role
around
was
this
in a
time of
comedy
year, she would let me
drama
know that the coffee in my
Off the
coffee maker had gone
Rails,
cold, and that it was time for me to
which
replace it. She was
released
very vague
late
about the temperature of the
July
drinks.
2021
I
in the
nodded,
UK.
running back to start a new pot, and opened the door to let her know that it would be ready momentarily. But she was gone. I looked down the
Now it
hallway
says
through the
death.
dining room and into the
On
living room,
July
but
12,
she was nowhere to be
2022,
seen.
Preston.
I found this odd since this was usually the time she would settle into the dining room, but I didn't pay it much thought. I went
Oh,
back to
so she's
doing
dead
dishes
too.
and eventually felt a hand on my shoulder. Thinking it was the cook, who was one of my good friends who would often sneak up on me, I looked down and
It
realized that
said
her name
July
was
12,
Marcus.
2020,
It was
Preston
dainty
died at the
and
age of
wrinkled,
57 at her
rather
home
like
in
Barb's.
Clearwater,
I
Florida.
turned around, and no one was there.
2 years
This was nothing
after she
unusual.
had been diagnosed
Barb
with
knew that the
breast
kitchen was
cancer.
off limits to residents, and she wasn't one to play tricks, despite being
Her
funny and
diagnosis was
sarcastic.
not wide
How did she disappear that
publicized.
fast?
Preston had
I
been
assumed it was one
receiving
of two
treatment
things. Either my imagination, or
cancer
perhaps just a
at
paranormal aspect I hadn't
Houston.
yet
She
witnessed.
also been
After all, it wasn't
treated
too
at other
far-fetched,
medical
given
centers.
that I
Her
had already
death
been
was
hearing and
announced
seeing
on
things today.
Instagram post
The day
under an
went on as
account
usual. We served dinner,
belonging
got the
to
kitchen
John
and dining room cleaned
Travolta
up, and prepared to leave. I did find it a
and
bit strange that
Ella
Barb was there
Brew.
for dinner. However, usually she never skipped. Maybe one of her family members had taken her out to eat or something. As my fellow dietary aides and I were heading to the elevator, we passed by a group of residents in the sitting area who told us goodbye as they did every night. But one of the residents stopped us and asked if we heard the news. None of us had,
That's so funny.
apparently, and he went on to explain.
John
Barb had passed
Travolta
that
was
morning.
born February 18th.
Naturally, we were all shocked. What happened? She was young and seemingly healthy. News of deaths usually
Feb-
made it to dietary staff last due to
February
the pressure of
18th,
negotiating and whatnot, but
1954.
to have gone the whole day not knowing. We were used to death, but it didn't make it all that much easier. As I was clocking out, however, it hit me. Hadn't I seen Barb earlier that day? In the afternoon? I was venting to my mom about the death and how it affected me personally. I also told her about what I had witnessed today, since she's a believer in the paranormal as I am. I told her how much it hurt me, especially since the last thing I had told her was, "See you tomorrow," the previous night, and she had died before I could see her. What my mom replied with, though, made me feel
John.
immensely better. Maybe that's why she visited you. Maybe she wanted to see you one last time before she passed on.
Is he still alive?
As much as
That's
I
the
miss
question.
Barb, I'm truly grateful
Yeah,
that
he's
I
still
got to
alive,
see her
but
one last time, even after she had passed. It makes me feel good
his
knowing
wife
that
is.
she had been thinking of me and what I said to her the night before.
He's still alive. If he is still alive, it
To
says
give you a mental idea of the house,
he's
it was a very
69
old
years
house right
old.
in the country that had an even older abandoned house right behind it, with no more than 1.5 feet separating the two. We were pretty much
That's what I'm
surrounded by
looking to
fields
see.
and underground caves.
I
To
think
start
he is
things
still
off,
alive. It's just he's
everyone knew that I had
probably
been
70
alone in
years
the
old.
house, but I only ever slept in the room maybe a total of 5 times the
Yeah,
entire
his
12
wife is the
years.
one that died.
The last time I ever
The
tried
one
to
that
sleep
played
in
in the
there,
Cat in the Hat.
something happened that made me refuse to sleep in there ever again.
She
I had
died
been laying
in
there for just a few minutes, tossing
2020.
and turning about, going through the usual difficulties of falling asleep.
That was like 2 years
Dad
ago.
was in the living room just a few feet away watching TV. I roll over to my side to find that the pillow next to me has an indentation on it. Now, plenty of things have already happened in the house to let me know that it was
My
haunted,
ear was itching.
so I didn't just brush it off like some might. I was already freaked out, but nothing too major.
I ain't got no
I
ear
flipped the
cleaners.
pillow and fluffed it back up, hoping that was the end of it. It wasn't. I feel something brush against my arm, the arm that is closest to the pillow.
Okay,
My eyes
now
burst wide open,
Spencer.
and I see the pillow has an indentation again. As I lay there frozen, my entire bed started to shake. Not violently, but enough that I could
He
feel it. I bolted into the living room, and the
no, the
first
one
thing my dad said to me
from
was,
the Santa Claus movie.
He could tell by how white my face was and how wide my eyes were that I had been freaked out.
Yeah,
After that,
he's about my age.
two couches
He's
in the
like
living room.
30.
We would always hear the screams of little girls in the fields behind the house at night, but never could find
Let's
anything
see.
upon investigation. Dad asked the
He was
person
born
who
May
was renting to
18th.
about it and was told that everyone reports that, as well as a lot of the other strange activity. One morning,
1992.
my dad woke up with a pack of his cigarettes, with all of the cigarettes except for one in the middle flipped upside down.
30.
It was a brand new pack.
These are the stuff he's played in.
He's
He's
the night before.
feature films, Disney, The Kid.
Knows that it wasn't like that before. Every single night there would be footsteps pacing back and forth down the
Played in
hall.
the Santa Claus 2, the Santa Claus 3, the Escape Claus.
First. Then it would switch
The
to
Escape Claus I haven't
This
seen
would
yet
usually
because
go
it's
on
on
from
Netflix.
about 12 to 2:30 or 3 in the morning. I watched a lot of late-night infomercials
I don't know, I've never
on TV
seen it.
because of that preventing me from falling asleep. If you didn't
Never seen it, never heard of it.
you would wake up to someone tickling your bare feet. The computer chair, also in the living room, would sometimes lean back on its own, ever so slightly, then rotate a little bit as well. Not a lot.
He's also played
but
Return to Neverland.
one night when I was just about to fall asleep, my remote control gravedigger monster truck
Played in Zoom.
moved about 3 feet on its own. My dad heard it as well, since his bedroom door
I guess
was open.
Zoom, like
There were no
the
other
TV
walls between the living
thing that was
room
on
and his.
PBS, I guess.
It was a small house. I laughed and told him that was a good one.
I think he used to come on and say Zoom, Suma, Suma,
I
Zoom.
realized that the remote control for it
About a whole
was
bunch of
literally
kids and
sitting on
stuff.
the other side of the room. Then he also pointed out that the TV wasn't even in
Raising Helen.
it was charging in the kitchen. That one freaked me out too.
The
We also
Princess
went to
Diaries
investigate
2.
the abandoned house behind
For
the
Royal
house.
Engagement.
It legitimately looked like someone just decided to leave and not take anything with them.
The Shaggy Dog.
Before I get your hopes up, the recordings have unfortunately been lost, and
Harold.
as this was several years ago. We managed
Harold.
to catch several orbs. What appeared to be a face in one of the mirrors.
The Happening.
Horse
Perfect
started to walk on
Sisters.
its own, just as we were leaving the room it was in.
Timo Supremo. Stephen King's Storm of the
Subreddit about a scary
Century.
experience with a human I had while walking home late from a job.
It also was in Law and Order.
This bus to my part of town, and it reminded me of this experience, which still gives me chills, and I've never been able to make any sense of it. Before this, I have not had any paranormal experiences, and
He was
never had any after this. I've always believed that a person's spirit can exist in a limited space between life and death.
the ninth season of Law and Order premiered in the United States on NBC September 23rd, 1998, and ended with two-part episodes in May 26, 1999.
Yet, so I was taking the bus and had to walk about a mile home every night.
It was released on.
Had lived in the neighborhood.
It was released on.
So rarely felt unsettled walking.
It was released on DVD
My house
in December 6, December 6, 2011.
I was standing on the northwest corner, waiting for the light to change so I could finally get home, make some dinner, wind down and watch Netflix till I went to sleep around 3 or 4 a.m. Since I was working swings regularly, I was very awake and used to keeping odd hours, so I'm certain that my eyes weren't playing tricks on me. The lights I was standing at often takes a long time to change, and people sometimes
on the end of the season 9.
My iPod was dead, and so I was just looking around, waiting to cross. I glanced down the street.
He made a guest appearance in the episode
up a winding road
Fed.
to the main part of town. There was a big bank of blackberry bushes
Fed,
growing between
F-E-D.
my house and my neighbor's house, and I noticed them moving slightly. We have a lot of raccoons in the area, so I didn't think.
No.
Right before
No,
this light
Fed,
changed,
F-E-D.
something shot out of the bushes. It was shaped like a human, but it was on all fours, rear end in the air, head close to the ground, but there was absolutely no way that any human could move so quickly on all fours. It was too big to be a dog. There's no wildlife in the area, and if this thing was standing on two legs, it would have been at least 6'5", maybe 7 feet tall. It didn't run like an animal, and it used its arms and legs independently.
I didn't really watch. I didn't really watch a Law and Order stuff. That was usually
black clothing,
black
fur, but it's
Debbie's
kind of black
shows and my sister's shows. I didn't really watch stuff like that.
And eliminates depth, more like a shadow. Just as
Kind of crime shows kind of was not my thing.
Embankment near some other houses. I finally realized that the light was green, and
I'm not into solving murders. That's something I like to watch.
In that area anymore, and even driving through it at night still gives me the chills.
Just I can't watch surgery dramas because I can't stand looking at
I'm glad that it didn't
surgery and body parts. I don't even like my own inside, so why would I want to watch someone else's surgery? Where is my whatchamacallit?
What I've become more open about, however, is certain feelings that can't
Wait, where is it?
Ow! That someone is watching you when you're alone. The feeling of sort of half being on your shoulder when there's no one around.
Can't find it.
My tattoo studio was built over 100 years ago. It was a bank. The original safe is in the basement.
No, I'm trying to find
eat, nap, whatever. It's been bars, a bakery, and several tattoo shops before us. So,
I think my bobs.
I feel myself being touched. I feel like I'm being watched. Being alone at the shop is miserable for me. I feel sick, physically, and anxious. I've been here nearly a decade. When you work somewhere long enough...
Well, I don't want to say it because you're like, ew.
The sound the upstairs bathroom makes when the faucet is turned on, the difference in between front and back door opening and closing, where a person would be in the shop by the sound of their footsteps. Occasionally, I will hear the distinct sound of footsteps when I'm alone in the shop. I've heard a person cough as if to get my attention, though I didn't hear anyone come in. The stairs to apologize, only to find there was no one there. I've had people, both those who claim to be empaths or sensitives or psychics, and those who don't even believe in ghosts, mention they feel similarly. A lady once told me as she was getting tattooed, "There's a man behind me. I feel him."
Did I find it? Nope.
I got freaked out and asked her not to talk about it. She got to leave and go home, but I'm stuck here. I'd almost rather not know. So here are my more recent experiences.
Which occurred
last week.
You would have heard me and went,
appointment and my coworkers had left. A client had brought their son with them for a short appointment. He was probably 5 or younger. The kid stood at the top of the stairs and peered into the basement.
"Sorry, Dr. Nick."
His dad, "Daddy, the basement is haunted." I was like, "Dude, get your sixth sense, kid, away from the stairs, because he's freaking me out."
I smelled it.
As I'm leaving, I lock the front door.
I smelled
turn
it.
off the lights and go to leave through the back door. Right as I'm walking out, the phone rang. I assumed
What's
it was
under
my
proof?
boss
What's under
calling
proof?
me, asking why I was there so late.
I mean, I didn't know that something was under and it was open at the same time.
The answer button. The ringing stops and the phone read, "No use." My blood turned cold. Long use means that someone had already answered the phone.
I'm confused myself. What are you talking about?
I hit the end call button about 100 times and tossed the phone away.
Yes.
It rang again 6 times.
I guess I won't be cut for a while. We're gonna get long as a chick's. Oh, there it is.
I left my keys
right in front of me.
No thanks. I called my boss
I'm
and
gonna.
told him what happened. He's not real hip on the ghost stuff, but it freaked him out too. I told him he needs to come get my keys from the basement for me, or I was quitting. And in that moment, I was completely serious.
I didn't.
He drove from the next city over as I waited next to my car in the freezing rain so that I didn't have to be in the building. I don't know. I just felt
Scooby-Doo, where are you?
I felt something was wrong. That was the first time I had ever had anything happen that was more than just a feeling or uneasiness or offhanded comment from a client. Someone once told me spirits can be attracted to places where blood has been spilt. I don't know if any of that is true. Maybe everything that's happened can be explained, but I'm not going to be here alone, ever again.
Wait, what? It's time to quit invading the
I grew up in a
darkness.
smaller city outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Even though Pittsburgh is a
To
well-known big
quit,
city,
tell them to quit invading
things
the
outside
darkness.
Pittsburgh are often rural. My stepdad's house was an old farmhouse on one of these country roads. You should know that I'm the youngest of my mom's 4 children, so by the time I was born, we didn't live with my stepdad anymore, and I grew up in the city area about 15
Right.
minutes away from my stepdad's house. Even though my mom and stepdad weren't together anymore, they were still very close, and we would always spend time at his house, especially during the
Right, you
summertime.
said Darth Vader.
He had a huge in-ground pool that I loved to swim in. I don't really know much about the history of the house other than it was built in 1910, and like I said, I am the youngest of my siblings, so my 2 brothers and my sister actually lived in my stepdad's house for years before I was born. My sister is the oldest at 42. My oldest brother is 37,
Almost
and
time
my
for
younger
my
brother is
honey.
32, while I'm the youngest at 24. I was a surprise baby when my mom was 40 years old. Only reason I explain all this
Say
is
what?
because my siblings lived there for years and have many of their own paranormal stories that they used to tell me about this house. Most of the stories were feelings that
Yes.
someone was watching you, or that they thought that they would see shadows in the dark. Nothing really that spooky or original that couldn't be
Oh.
explained as my siblings just trying to mess with me. My mom even had mentioned some
I was
similar
watching
stories where she felt that there was something
one YouTuber I
in
like to
this
watch,
house,
Markiplier,
but nothing that I can remember in great detail.
and he was
I
playing
think
this
it's
game.
important to
It's got this
explain the
stick
layout
figure
of the house
guy.
because the location inside is a key factor in whatever was
And
haunted
he's
within
like,
this house. At least it seems like it to me.
I guess it's
There
like
were 2 doors
supposed to be like a
within the house, one on
post-apocalyptic
the front
game.
with a big porch that we didn't really use because
So
it was directly off the road.
for money
And we had a little
is
driveway
meat.
that led up to the other door that was on the back of the house. So when you entered from the back door,
So it's like
you would walk into the kitchen first,
um
then would lead you past the
he
basement door on the left
he's
and
like,
to what we call
wait a
the
minute.
front
He said,
room.
I'm wearing no
The front
shoes,
room is where
and
my
where's my
experience
pants?
took place. It was just a big space that I
And
guess
he's
could have
like,
been used as a dining
so
space
he
or
goes to the
something
pier
like that, and on the
and
other
plays a
side of the
game,
front room
and
was
he
the
wins a
actual
pair of
living room
shoes
with all
called the
couches,
crab walking
TV, and
shoes.
fireplace. But on the left side of the front
And
room
it's
there was
like
a small closet
crab
door with a
walking
spiral
shoes.
staircase that would lead you to one of the
They
bedrooms
just normal
upstairs.
shoes, but they
If you
make
kept
you walk
walking
like a
straight from the
crab.
front door, you'd get to the bathroom, and that was the end of that
So he
house
put
for me.
them on, and he was like
To the
doing the
door
crab
on the
walk
right, you would get
with
to
his
where the
hands
front
going
door
click click
was.
click.
If you walked into the front door, you were looking directly at the regular stairs to get to the second
And
floor,
then
not the spiral
he
stairs
found
that
another
spiraled
and
forward.
he switched it
And on
out
the
for the
left at
other
the
shoe
bottom
he
of the
found. It
stairs is
says
the master bedroom that my
a
mom
single
and
shoe.
stepdad slept in.
You should try to
3
fish for
bedrooms
another
upstairs, and
one.
each
See if
room
there's
had
another one
different
in the
colored
trash
carpets,
can.
so we always just
Then
referred
he's
to
like,
each room by the color.
clicks on it,
At
and
the top
says
of the
fishes for
stairs,
another
there were
shoe.
2 of the bedrooms directly
There's
to
only
your
one.
left and right.
So
To the left is what
so
we
then
call
he
the green
looks
room,
in his
and to the
inventory
right is
says
the blue
one
room.
shoe.
From the blue room was the door
Well,
to the
one shoe
last
is
bedroom
better
called the
than
pink room.
having 2 shoes, I guess,
So
because at
you had
least
to either
one
walk
shoe
through
you
the blue
have,
room to
and you
get to
don't
the
have
pink room,
something else.
or you
Forgot
could
what
go
it
up the
said.
spiral stairs from the front room to get there.
It
Each room was
said you
my
don't have to
sister's
worry
room
about
because
using
they
the
were all of
other
her
foot.
paranormal stories in
So
one
he
room.
wears the one shoe, and
I needed that room
he's
for
walking on
myself to sleep,
one foot
but I think every
with
single one
on
of
his
us had fallen
hands.
down those spiral stairs at some point, if not more than once. They were kind of dangerous because the steps were pretty steep, but weren't long enough to fit your entire foot onto them, even as a little kid. I remember vividly when I fell down those stairs. I had been hanging out in the pink room watching Barney when I decided to go downstairs. I was only maybe 3 or 4 years old at the time, but I don't remember tripping on anything or missing one of the stairs. I just fell very hard all the way down the stairs as soon as I started walking.
I think it's
Just
on
as if
PC
someone
because that's what he was playing it on.
No one really thought anything of it, though,
I think he was
because
playing it on
we were
Steam.
kids, and what kid hadn't fallen down the stairs at some point? Anyways, now that you have a little background and understanding of where in the house I'm talking about, I can finally explain my paranormal experience. I think I was maybe 4
It's
or
got
5
some
at the time.
cute
This
combat
happened
in it,
probably
like
1999 or 2000. I was
all
getting
right,
over some kind
but
of cold.
I don't remember what the name of it is,
coughing a
but
little bit, but
it's got some
otherwise
cute
I was
combat
doing
because
so.
he's like,
But at
I
night,
don't know, like he was
the
throwing
coughing would get
cheese
worse
at the
and keep me
people.
up. At the time, I slept in the middle of my mom and stepdad in the master room. I kept waking up coughing and asked my mom to give me a
No,
drink
I
of
don't
water
remember.
on the nightstand
I don't remember the
since I
name
was
of it. I have
anemic
to
and couldn't reach it.
look it back up. The
After
video.
waking my mom up a bunch of times, she eventually got annoyed and told me to get up and get some water from the kitchen. Not wanting to get in trouble
Man, they
again,
say
I
your
got up and
doll
went to
is
the
Britney
kitchen.
Spears'
I
legs.
think it was probably around 2 or 3 in the morning and no one else was awake in the house. I drank the water, standing in front of the refrigerator, and left the glass in the kitchen when I
Hope
was
one didn't
done.
land in my.
As I started to walk through the front room to go back to the master bedroom, I heard
I have to
something
put
that
that back
stopped
a
me in my
little
tracks.
bit further. There
The
we go.
front room and the living room didn't have any
I
walls
don't want one of
dividing
those
them.
to land in my
There was one
drink.
of the couches there that kind of separated the room. The sound was coming from the little closet under the spiral stairs. There was some kind of stick propped up against the door to the closet, maybe a broom handle with the broom screwed off. I was stopped with my back
Right?
against the couch, so I was facing the closet, but was closer to the living room, as far away as I could be from the closet. I heard a man's voice, and not a voice of anyone I knew or know to this day. It
No,
definitely
I said
wasn't
I
my
moved it
stepdad's
further
voice.
away since
It sounds
nothing
pretty
landed
cheesy
it.
now, but the voice asked, "Who is in my house?" Very loud and angry. There weren't any TVs on, and no one else seemed to have heard it but me. As scary as the
I need
voice
to get
was,
me.
it
I need
wasn't
to
as
get me a
scary when the
regular
closet
cup with a
door started
lid.
shaking like it was going to open up and the stick fell down. At this point, I was
Yeah, I don't
scared
have
out
a
of my
cup with a
mind and
lid.
booked it back
It's
into
just
the
a
master
regular
bedroom with my
plastic
mom and
cup.
stepdad, who were still fast asleep in bed. The next morning, I told everyone what happened, and the stick was still laying on the ground like I remember it from the night before. Naturally, everyone thought that I was just making it up and probably knocked the stick over by myself or just dreamed the whole thing. But they still looked in the closet anyways to try and make me feel better. Of
Yep.
course, there was nothing there. But I feel like the fact that the stick was on the ground in the morning and not propped up like it was before was proof enough for me that it really happened. I never really had any other experiences like that after that night.
That's a little bit better,
It felt
but
like someone was
now it's
watching
gonna
me
go
in that house.
rinse my hands off
Yes,
after trimming.
until my stepdad
I'll be right
died in
back.
2006.
I'll put some music
My
on while you
stepdad
wait.
was a Vietnam veteran and had definitely seen some stuff in his day. He was always a good person, but was someone you
For
never
Britney
wanted to
Spears,
mess with. He wasn't scared of anyone.
creepy
He
pasta.
passed away of lung cancer, but after he passed,
I
it
knew
was
it.
like the evil force that was always in that house just went away. Shortly after, my oldest brother got to keep
I
the
knew you were
house
listening to
and
creepy
still lives
pasta.
there to this day. He never talks about any strange occurrences. My theory is that whatever was in that house was forced to leave whenever my stepdad passed.
Tartar
I
sauce.
always wondered who that man was that spoke to me that night. I moved into a flat about a year ago, and weird things have been happening that really
Connor.
messing with my head. Small things at first that I just brushed off, but lately ramping up to bigger, more frequent things that I just can't explain. If anyone has any ideas, I'd really appreciate it, as currently I'm left with either my flat is haunted or I'm having a psychotic break. So, I live in a town that is a bit of a mecca for alternative people
I had to
seeking
pause the
spiritual
game.
experiences.
That way
Which in
my
itself is
character doesn't get murdered.
thought to be of
Be
great
back.
spiritual significance. The big hill I live on, however, was one of the last places to be inhabited, and before my building was built in the 80s, there was apparently nothing on this spot. I have been told that there had been a bit of difficulty keeping tenants here with a huge turnover in recent years, but mainly because of an unpleasant character who lived in one flat for a long time and caused a lot of bad feeling. Just to set the scene, as I'm pretty sure nobody died here, nothing truly horrific happened as far as I know, and there's no long history to the particular building. So why something or somebody would be attracted to haunt my place, I do not know. So small things at first.
I'm
The
back.
first 6 months or so, I kept finding the hot tap running in the bathroom sink, usually when either my ex or my mum were staying over. Usually I blame them, as
From
different
his
taps than I'm
South
used to,
Georgia
and I just didn't want
manor.
anybody in the bathroom to see the taps being turned on. So easy solution.
So what I do with all
They
this
just
stuff
forgot
that I
to
got
turn
in
it
my
on fully.
inventory?
My mom is particularly creeped out by this, as she swore it wasn't her and often jokes that I'm a
No, I'm just trying to figure out what I do with all
madman,
this stuff.
as so much weird stuff happened in her house when I lived there as a kid, and still today the lounge door has an eerie habit of swinging slowly shut when I'm over. It was maybe 2 months ago that something really freaky happened that scared the bejesus out of me. My bedroom is at the front left of the building with the bed head along the left-hand external wall, a big bedside cabinet to each side. So basically, as I lie in bed, on the left side, the bedside cabinet on my far right is on the external detached corner of the building. It was maybe 2 a.m. as I'm rubbish at sleeping when I heard a scuffling that sounded like someone rummaging through paper from that corner.
Came down to his world or mine, she took.
Building. Do badgers even do this? Or my upstairs neighbor doing something that threw the noise in a weird way so it sounded like it was downstairs. But no, it happened again, and it was definitely in the room. I freaked out quite a lot and scrambled for my bedside lamp and turned it on just to have it immediately turn itself off again. At this point, I honestly thought this is how I die. I've seen too many horror movies, and although it might not be the most dramatic thing to happen, living alone and hearing something in the room with you at night in the dark is absolutely terrifying. I can't explain how the light turned itself off, as it has a switch that's either on or off. Can't be balanced between the two settings, so it can't flick itself off if it's half on, if you know what I mean. After switching it back on, no sleep was had that night. All was quiet for a week or so. Next, I went away for a weekend. When I got back, I found my alarm clock on the floor about a foot away from the edge of my bed. I'm really house-proud and probably would be a massive pain to live with, but as I live alone, can keep everything in its spot to my tidy little heart's content. There is no way I would leave something lying on the floor like that. It's one of those mental old-fashioned ones with bells on top, and I know from past experiences that it makes a lot of racket if you drop it on wood floor, so I couldn't have knocked it off without noticing. The back was off, and the batteries were lying across the floor. So weird, but not too terrifying. I managed to pretend that didn't happen either, so I wouldn't be too scared to sleep in my own home. Then, over the next 2 weeks, things kept happening. A couple of more with the clocks, too. First, the time kept changing. Not consistently running slow, but like it was being set to a new time and then running happily from there. New batteries. Nobody had touched it, and it hadn't happened before these recent occurrences. Then, for the first time, the bathroom hot tap turned itself on while I was in the room. Actually in the bath, to be specific. 1 minute, not on. Next minute, out of nowhere, blasting hot water. Then I found something else on the same bedside cabinet with the back off and batteries out. I have a makeup mirror surrounded by lights as I do my makeup when I get out of the shower and don't want to terrify my neighbors by opening the curtains. I don't move it, let alone knock it in any way that would jolt the back off. Then this week, another pointless clock thing. I always time my wake up and journey to work exactly so I don't get in early because I'm actually pretty lazy. I have a 5-minute walk, get there on the dot, and sign in every time at exactly X time. This time I get there and my assistant manager points to the clock and makes an, "Ooh, you're early, special occasion?" type remark. And I was, 10 minutes early. Exactly 10 minutes. When I had left home, 5 minutes in the future. I told him his clock was wrong. Can't remember what he replied, but I do remember saying to him, "Yeah, right, because all my clocks are wrong." I was so certain that, Occam's razor and all that, his clock had to be wrong because it would be too stupid for every clock in my flat to be at the exact same wrong time, including my phone. But as I discovered when I got home that night, they all were. I had to Google the time as literally every clock of mine showed the same time. I didn't actually realize you could still manually adjust the time on smartphones. I'm of the generation when we had to set up all that stuff with every new phone we got in the late 90s, early 2000s, but since smartphones, I have literally done nothing to set up phones apart from transfer all my stuff onto my new handset in one go and bingo, phone set up. I have just never had to look for that setting, but when I did, 10 minutes fast. As was my battery-powered alarm clock, as was my microwave. These things are so small and utterly pointless individually, but taken together it's just weird. I am easily spooked as a general rule, and I have to not creep myself out or I'll never be able to sleep there again. But it's so odd. Helpful colleagues have suggested I try to talk to whatever it might be, but honestly, I'd rather call a priest or burn it down. I'm not communicating with anything that might be there. I've also been advised not to burn sage and try to eject it, as it might make it angry, which I really do not want to do either. Any thoughts? I have a carbon monoxide alarm, so hopefully it's not that. Also, hopefully I'm not finally cracking up mentally. I don't have rats or mice either to explain the weird scuffly noise in the bedroom. I had mice in a previous rented place, and there are no signs here. Is all this too insignificant and easily explainable? I just don't know what is happening.
Yep, you okay?
Throughout middle and high school, I was never considered one of the popular people, but I got along with almost everyone. I would smile and talk to those who were shy and didn't have as many friends, because I used to get bullied quite often and knew how it felt to be an outcast. One day of the summer of freshman year, I received an Instagram DM from a guy a grade above me, who we'll call Sam. Sam had always been someone with little to no friends, had a reputation for being weird and a bit creepy, and got picked on for his looks. Like I said, I was nice and got along with almost everyone, and despite the rumors about him being weird and creepy, I gave him the benefit of the doubt. I messaged him back, and we began having a completely normal conversation about plans for the summer. I felt bad for him because of the things people would say about him, and since
Hey,
it
Dick,
would make
bye.
me uncomfortable, I saw no harm in talking to him. Over the next couple of days,
You
Sam and
hate
I
Dick,
continued
bye.
messaging on Instagram, and the conversation stayed normal.
Oh,
During one of our conversations about school, he asked what my schedule was, since he was a grade ahead and could tell me whether or not
they had their bath.
and what to expect from the classes. The first face-palming decision
Almost time for them to go down.
my schedule to Sam, which I would later want to smack the crap out of myself for. As summer went on, Sam and I
Oh, what's my honey gonna have to do?
my number. I still wasn't getting any creepy or weird vibes from him, so I gave it to him. During summer, Sam and I were still messaging each other, but as the end of summer was approaching, he was beginning to annoy me. If I didn't respond to his text right away, he would message me over and over until I finally did. He began wanting to talk to me 24/7 and would act upset if I was busy and unable to talk. This only got worse once school started. Before messaging him, I would barely
For
receive
the ending.
He then began to walk up to me at my locker in between classes, and without asking, started walking me to some of them. Sometimes he'd be waiting outside of my classroom doors when the period would end to walk me to my next class, and then other times he'd be waiting outside my classes to talk with me until the bell rang to start the period. It's important to mention that I was dating my current boyfriend at the time, and had never once asked Sam to do any of this. At the start of this, he would only walk me to a few of my classes or be waiting outside the door of some of them to talk with me. Over time, he began walking me to every single one, waiting for me outside every single door. See why I said I would want to slap the crap out of myself for giving him my schedule. I began feeling uncomfortable by this, but me being nice, I didn't want to hurt his feelings by telling him that. Second face-palming decision. I started leaving my classes early so I wouldn't have to see him or be walked to class by him. Since I started leaving classes early, he literally began to memorize the way I'd walk to my classes and would meet me at random spots in the halls. I then started to walk different ways to my classes to try to prevent seeing him. Sam ended up catching on to this, so he started leaving his classes early to wait outside my door just so he could walk me to mine. Around this time, I was even more uncomfortable and started responding to his messages less and less. I still didn't tell him to stop or that he was making me uncomfortable, and I really wish I would have just put my big girl pants on and gotten it over with. I barely ever responded to his messages as the year went on, which made me think that he would catch on to the fact that I didn't want to talk to him anymore or have him walk me to my classes. No. Eventually, I became so uncomfortable that I would have one of my friends walk me to and from every single one of my classes in the hopes that he would just leave me alone. Again, no. I figured that a normal person would see that I was with my friends and didn't want to talk to him, but Sam just never took any of the hints. I got to a point where he was constantly messaging me and I wasn't talking to him, and I began dreading going to school because I just wanted him to leave me alone. As a last resort, I stopped responding to Sam
What was the
altogether,
question?
and then blocked and unblocked him on Instagram since I'm private and he would know.
Yeah, 'cause I don't remember what the question was. I watch what? Um, no, I don't watch color. Just stay indoors and play my game. Yeah. And then um, the joke is what what did what did the what did Goofy say to the signpost? Stop goofing around. What? Yep. Heck yeah. Bye. Bye.